It's just a science project.
Silent breed is people!
You know, a doctor friend once said the same thing to me. Frankenstein was his name.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
That sounds like something out of science fiction.
Please explain to me the scientific nature of the whammy.
We live in a spaceship, dear. So?
Yes, science!
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Hello and welcome to episode 306 of Science on Top. Today's Sunday, the 5th of August, 2018. I'm Ed Brown, and on the show today is Penny Dumsday.
Hello.
Lucas Randall.
Howdy.
And journalism student and science communicator, Elena Hansen.
Hello.
And before we start, I have two announcements to make. The first is the usual one. Go to scienceontop.com/donate if you like what we do and you want to support the show. The other announcement is some big news. We are delighted to be hosting an evening with Dr. Pamela Gay in Melbourne, Australia on October the 10th. Dr. Gay is an astronomer, a podcaster, a citizen science advocate, and an extraordinary science communicator. You might have heard our interview that we did with her a few years back, which is one of our special episodes. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. She'll be giving a talk on novel technologies in astronomy, as well as a question and answer session. So if you've got any space or astronomy or science questions, if you want them explained, there's your chance. And after that, of course, we'll be doing a live recording of the show. So I think it'll be really interesting and a lot of fun. If you're interested, scienceontop.com/live. It is $20, but all profits will go to the non-profit organisation where Pamela works, the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, which does a host of good things, from citizen science projects to
many good things,
helping scientists collaborate and educational resources for teachers. A really, really good organisation. So scienceontop.com/live. Should be a lot of fun. And on today's show, the Caribbean lizards that survived hurricanes, the whale and dolphin hybrid that definitely isn't a Wolphin, and we ask what happens when you crank the Large Hadron Collider up to 11. But first, we're going to begin with a more sobering story. The government of Sierra Leone has announced that a new species of Ebola, the sixth, has been discovered there. And perhaps unsurprisingly, it was found in bats. Lucas, we should be clear from the outset, there is no indication that this species has spread to humans yet, is there?
That is correct. No indication the species has spread to humans. However, the species was found in bats that were living in someone's house. So that's like, I actually wrote F exclamation mark on my on my paper there when I was reading it, because that's not what you want to get.
No.
Hey, you got bats. Do you mind if we test them? Can we just maybe do a bit of a swab? Sure. Oh, they got Ebola. Get out of here. Oh, it's a brand new Ebola. Dude. It probably didn't go down exactly that way. I'm
choosing to believe it did.
Sort of projecting.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. That definitely someone would have said, dude, at some point. But yeah, the other... Okay, so let's break this down for a second. This discovery of this new Ebola species, all right? So as you mentioned, there's now 6 Ebola species. There's only 2 others that have really been known to cause a great deal of problem in the past. Obviously, Ebola Zaire is one of the most common infections that we've seen, and it's the one that strikes fear into the heart of most people when they hear about a new outbreak. So that's also the one that was behind the most recent outbreaks in Sierra Leone. There's a couple of other ones as well that have not been as common, and there's a couple that have not even ever really caused major issues with humans. So I won't go through the names of them. You can look that up yourself. But basically, this new one, which they're calling Bombali, which is named after the district where it was found up in the north of Sierra Leone. So that's the placeholder name, basically, that's been given to this. Now, what's really bizarre about this is normally this sort of announcement is made after peer review and being published in a journal. That's not what happened here. It was a press release. Now, normally that's a big red flag for us for, do we need to take this seriously? Is there some
shenanigans?
But basically the reason once Sierra Leone were the government Sierra Leone were notified about this discovery, they wanted to make an announcement, and they wanted to get out ahead of it, because there has been such mass hysteria over there, and there's been so much civil unrest as a result of the outbreaks, and there's also been various witch doctory kind of responses to outbreaks in the past that have put the public at risk, because they've become in some cases quite suspicious of Western medicine intervention and so forth. So Sierra Leone have wanted to get in front of it and say, look, this is not a risk. We don't even know whether this can impact on humans as yet. So we're not at that point that we know, and it's not an outbreak. We've just discovered a new species. Now it could well be, and it's certainly possible that this is restricted to a very small area. There are, as we said, several other species of Ebola, but this particular one has been sent to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention over in the United States. They're doing testing on the moment, and there's a particular process they go through where they basically create like a pseudovirus, and they attach the genetic code of this new species to this pseudovirus so that they can do testing on it. And that pseudovirus with this genetic payload was actually able to be introduced into human cells. Although we don't know whether the actual virus is able to be introduced to human cells, and we also don't know whether the actual virus, once introduced to human cells, is actually able to cause disease, is actually able to cause a problem. So there's a lot of unknowns at this point. I particularly enjoyed, in a morbid sort of way, the exclamations of one of the scientists who was quoted about this, because this scientist basically said, "This is really exciting. This is the most exciting thing that happened." Really? Really? Is it?
That's a scientist who needs to get out more.
This is Tracy Goldstein. She's from the One Health Institute at UC Davies. She said, "It's really interesting. I think it's exciting, but we've got a lot of work to do to really understand if it is a pathogen and whether it does or doesn't pose a threat." So yeah, I guess exciting is a relative thing. I was excited by yet another way that we could all die, so that was exciting, I guess. But yeah, it's one of those. For me, Ebola is one of those terrifying things, because when I first became aware of Ebola, there were no vaccines for it. There was no effective treatment for it. It was basically a death sentence, and a really, really fast one at that. It's one of those diseases that's right on the tripping point that it kind of should burn itself out really, really fast, because it is so incredibly infectious and causes such devastation to the human body so quickly that it's only really with modern times with air travel that it's become, that it has the potential to spread so far. And of course, we've actually seen that as well. So yeah, new Ebola. Stay tuned. We'll let you know whether it actually does pose a threat to you. They have found other bats that are carrying it as well. So they've done other bats. They've swabbed other bats. Apparently, it involves an anal swab as well. That doesn't seem very nice. But poor bats. But anyway, I've written poor bats in the mud.
How did they even discover it? Was this just a routine? They just tend to swab the anuses of bats generally, or was this like a program?
I kind of want to think that there is just a routine swabbing that happens. You know what I mean? They find a bat, they give it a routine swabbing just to see. No, it didn't actually elaborate on this. It did just say the discovery was made by scientists from the University of California, Davis, and Columbia University as part of a US-funded effort to find unknown viruses that have the potential to cause outbreaks in people. Right. So they didn't really say what the program is or how they're implementing it. But yes, I'm assuming there was, there are bats here. Let's stick things in them and see what we find.
But I think for now, the take-home lesson from this story is stop living with bats. Maybe put the bats outside in the shed or something. Don't let them. They're not pets.
Yeah, don't cuddle them. Probably don't eat them, because I think that's one of the vectors there. That if you eat the bats, That's how you can get the new Ebola.
Is it the new?
It's like the hipster Ebola.
Is that Ebola? Was it?
Yeah.
I know it was it was motor neuron disease that Dr. Raichi had been working on that with people in Guam.
That's
I think.
right. That's another.
Yeah, they were eating bats.
Another thing. That's right. Where I was hosting the show that episode when Dr. Raichi was on, because you were off at Comic-Con from memory. So yes, we went into great detail about that story of when they had this bat tree in Guam, where the locals would scale the fence of the U.S. military base and run to this tree to grab the bats so that they could eat them. Like, I don't think they did it right there and then, but they'd take them away.
Right. Okay, Penny. Last year, Hurricanes Irma and Maria tore through the Caribbean, wreaking devastation throughout the region. Hurricane Maria, in particular, caused more than $90 billion of damages, and a recent study put the death toll at over 1,100 people. But amongst all this destruction was a rare chance to see how natural disasters affect the evolution of a group of animals. In particular, a little group of lizards native to the Turks and Caicos Islands. Penny, the lizards are good at hanging on, aren't they? They're tenacious.
They are. Well, they would want to be if they were going to survive a hurricane. So this is one of those studies where you think, if I were doing it, I probably would have just thrown up my hands and gone, right, no one wants me to do this research. Because it was actually a study on the effects of getting rid of rats that had been introduced and to see what happens to the lizards once the rats are gone. So Colin Donoghue and his colleagues went and they caught the lizards and they measured their bodies and legs and toes and flew home. And 4 days later, Hurricane Irma came. So if that was me, I would be thinking, oh, great, what's the point of this whole rat? Obviously, apart from just the devastation, but as regarding my research, it's not great. But what they saw is an opportunity to understand, what can be the effect of natural disasters on evolution. And they had this really recent data set on the, I think it's anoles lizards, and they flew back to the island, once it was sort of safe to do so, found that the islands had obviously taken a hit but were also rebounding. So, the trees that survived were putting up new leaves and the lizards were there too and clinging to the twigs and trees with sticky little toes. So the question here was the survival random, or did the hurricane essentially select for particular traits in the lizards? So they caught them, and I thought this was interesting. It was easier to lasso them with loops of string at the end of fishing rods rather than just running up and grabbing them by hand.
Wow.
Okay, well, wow. I don't know what
that's some pretty good lassoing as well.
Yeah, that is some quite good lassoing. So it seems like it wasn't just a case of random survival. You're in the right place at the right time, you survive the hurricane, you don't happen to be. There do seem to have been traits that help the lizards survive. So their toe pads were 6 to 9% bigger than those of the individuals measured before the hurricane. Front legs were 2% longer, but the back legs were a bit shorter. And this can't really be explained by the toes growing in adults. There's no evidence that the lizards sort of grow that much over such a short time or anything. It seems to be that
these are the ones
natural
that survived.
Selection. These are the ones that survived. And again, this is not some really obvious change. You wouldn't have been able to notice it without having all these measurements. 2% longer front legs, 6 to 9% bigger toe pads. I mean, that's not a massive, massive difference. It's clearly a slight edge that some lizards have. So the next step they did was to try and find out, well, why would these things help them survive? Especially, why were their legs shorter? So they put them on, they got lizards. So their back legs were actually shorter.
So the front legs were longer, but the back legs were shorter.
The front legs were longer and the back legs were shorter. So there's a little picture of this in the article. They put them on wooden posts and the lizards would cling to the posts.
Such a good
and
photo.
Then they scientifically blew at the lizards with a leaf blower, the biggest one that they could find. And they saw that the lizards would, go to the sheltered side of the post, tuck their front legs to their bodies and cling on. But their hind legs jutted out. So the bigger their back legs were, they would act like sails. The wind would catch them and pull the lizard away. Now, they set up safety nets, so no lizards were harmed. So not only have they seen a case of sort of selection, but also how it might have worked. I think that the big toe pads for gripping is, I don't want to say a no-brainer because nothing's a no-brainer, but
it makes sense. I
think it makes sense, but the shorter hind legs and that kind of sail effect is quite interesting. So I think that's fascinating, especially because I guess over thousands and thousands of years, there'd be a lot of hurricanes, but there'd also be a lot of time in between hurricanes where the selective pressures could be very, very, very different. I guess given that global warming is happening, more climate change, extreme kind of events might change the selection pressures on these lizards. I really like this story just because of that sort of random chance that they've just happened to have this data set. They were looking at something else and were able to broaden it to the circumstances in hand. Yeah.
Like I said, it was a rare chance that they had that opportunity to look at a snapshot of before and after.
Yeah.
I think it was also, you talked about, now that the hurricanes are over, there's all the other evolutionary pressures have come back. One of the reasons I think that they were doing these studies was after a big effort to eradicate the islands of rodents and rats that were a pest.
The rats, yeah.
They wanted to see, what evolutionary changes happen once those rodents aren't there anymore. They got more than they bargained for. They got this extra data set and this extra chance to analyse the evolution. So it's pretty cool. Now, Dr. Peter Venkman once famously described the apocalypse as being a time of human sacrifice, mass hysteria, and dogs and cats living together. Well, Elena, it could be a portent of things to come, as researchers in Hawaii have discovered a cross between a melon-headed whale and a rough-toothed dolphin. It's not as kinky as it sounds, though. This is not a whale and a dolphin having babies, is it?
No, definitely not. The circumstances that you told about that were post-apocalyptic, I'm hoping they don't happen anytime soon. But this is, the interbreeding of actually two species of dolphin. They are not whales at all. And it's actually really interesting how they've seen this happen. So scientists announced the sighting of this hybrid in Hawaii, and they saw it last year off the coast of the island of Kauai, and they believe that it's actually the first record of a wild hybrid from both of these two species. So the melon-headed whale, although it is called a whale, it's actually not. And they got this name from, say, maybe 100, 150 years ago when the first whalers and sailors were going out to sea and they think they saw a whale. But they're probably too busy to actually properly identify and check and catch this whale or even really physically properly look at it. So they're like, oh yeah, we'll just assume and tell everybody that it is and hope that maybe one day they'll figure out it's not actually a whale. It's a species of dolphin that they just happen to be calling a whale. And this whale has a round head, and it's closely related to the pygmy killer whale and pilot whales. And as I said before, these aren't actually whales. They are oceanic dolphin species that are also known as blackfish. So the male hybrid that they found in the waters of Hawaii, it has a blotchy color pattern that matches the same of the rough-toothed dolphin. So it's got the appearance of one side of its parents, and it also has the melon-headed whale's dorsal cape, which is a kind of darker coloring on its back, just below its dorsal fin. So it means that it's showing the appearance of both species. After getting a skin biopsy with a crossbow from further away, so this is how the researchers...
with a crossbow?
Yeah, that sounds pretty severe, doesn't it?
Yeah, but...
It's a step up from a longbow, though, I guess.
It is. But you're going to have to get some sort of genetic material somehow. Without stressing the animal out, without it going further away, you're going to have to figure out some way, and they've come up with a crossbow.
Fair enough. Okay. That'd stress me out if someone
Because
was
they're not
firing
stressful.
a crossbow at me, but all right.
They've got to put a bit of fun into scientific research somewhere. Yeah, a little extra fun. So the researchers compared its DNA to genetic data of the two parental species, which were collected over the years through population genetic studies. So they already had this information available to them. The offspring that they have cited has been given the scientific name, Stenobredanensis. But a leading author of the study says it would be nice, but we can't jump to calling it a Wolphin. Because,
yes, we can. We can, and I will.
Yeah, Wolphin's just a little bit, too out there for me. But as I said before, both parents are from the oceanic dolphin species, and actually, there is already an animal that's called a Wolphin.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can't
That's
just
Christopher Walken.
Christopher Wolphin. You could give him that name if you wanted.
Wow.
So this Wolphin label has actually already been given to a hybrid of a false killer whale, which is another type of oceanic dolphin species, and an Atlantic bottlenose dolphin, which was born at Hawaii's Sea Life Park in 1985. And the individual Wolphin is actually still alive today.
So by the same logic, it also is not.
It is also, technically not a Wolphin, but it's already got the name for it anyway. So you can't necessarily give it to this new individual that they've seen, because then you'll just confuse yourself and be like, oh, is there a new species called a Wolphin? And no, we are going to shut that down already.
So this is not a new thing. This sort of hybridization has happened before, and for all we know, could be more widespread maybe.
Yeah, it has. So it could be widespread. But it's still considered rare because it's only the third confirmed instance of wild oceanic dolphins breeding. So they've only recorded 3 ever.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and what they're thinking, the circumstances that made this actually happen is that the melon-headed whale, which was the mum, could have actually got a bit lost and found herself with some new rough-toothed dolphin friends and be like, oh, this is a new pod. I quite like these people. I'm going to stick around with them for a while instead of try and find my old family. But we'll see how that happens in the future. There might actually be, the mum could breed again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know if it's anything like, a mule, which is it mules that can't breed? They are.
That's right. Yeah. Isn't that usually the case with hybrids?
Because even though their genetic material it's like closely related of the same species, it's not close enough to be fertile.
It's very cool anyway. Okay, Lucas, we're used to the Large Hadron Collider hurtling protons at each other and examining the bits left over. That's given us the Higgs boson and a host of other new subatomic particles. But in a proof of concept, the scientists at CERN recently announced they've successfully hurled atoms around at near the speed of light. Not just protons, the nucleus of an atom, but the proton and an electron. Lucas, that's kind of huge. That potentially opens the door, I guess, to...
I'll see what you did there. Yes, it's definitely more massive for sure. You're right.
Thanks. I was going to say it's huge news that potentially opens the door to like a new branch of particle physics, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was actually a little bit surprised that they have actually, and quite routinely apparently, do throw in atomic nuclei. So they've done that many times before. So apparently every year in the 4 weeks leading up to the annual winter shutdown, they do experiment and swap out proton collisions for atomic nuclei. So it's kind of like we're shutting down for the winter. Guys, is there anything you want to chuck in? Got anything lying around? Got some atomic nuclei, just going to chuck those in. But this time they actually did it with lead atoms. Lead atoms, Ed. Lead atoms.
So lead atoms?
Lead atoms. Now, what was also interesting is, so they didn't just go straight for the lead atoms. They actually did a few other experiments first, and they also used one of their one of the other nearby instruments, which is called the super proton synchrotron, which is the second largest accelerator at CERN. So it's tiny, it's really small. So first they did a test by accelerating xenon nuclei in the LHC, and they also tested some partially stripped lead ions. So they're taking some electrons away from lead atoms in this super proton synchrotron, and then they've gone, let's do it. Let's chuck them in. So they put them in, and I found this quite amusing. They were described as 24 bunches of atoms.
Is that the technical term for a collection of atoms?
I don't know. I don't know how many are in that. But then later on, they've dropped that down to only 6 bunches. I don't know what these bunches are. I'm kind of a little bit lost about the bunches. But I found it amusing anyway. I've actually written in my margin here, not sure how many in a bunch. So we don't know. Apparently, they then turn it up to full power. Full power, Ed. Do you remember how there was stories about turning it up to full power just with protons?
Oh, yeah.
Now they're turning it up to full power with lead atoms in it.
But I mean,
see what happens.
We ran the risk of tearing the space-time continuum in two last time, and black holes, and the Earth would be ripped in two. Dogs and cats living together. Sorry.
I know. Wolphins everywhere. It is funny you say that, because once they did this, they actually managed to maintain a beam for a couple of minutes, and it actually shut itself down. So the LHC automatically shuts itself down. They call it dumping the beam. It dumps the beam when it detects that too many of the particles have gone off course, because you don't want lead smashing into the side of highly calibrated magnets. Apparently, it's bad. They don't want
I can see that.
So as a result, so that's when they dropped it down to 6 bunches of atoms, and they then were able to keep the beam circulating for 2 hours, 2 full hours, and then they actually shut it down themselves. So it was stable. So they said because it was so stable, they reckon they could have easily kept it going for at least 15 hours, which they said is amazing, because that means they can get some really cool science out of it. What science, I hear you ask? What science? Well, they could make gamma rays. They could actually have what they call a gamma ray factory. Now, I don't know if you're up on your the Incredible Hulk stuff, but
I'm well behind.
Right. So gamma rays made the Hulk. That's of course fiction, apparently. So gamma rays are generally not great for flesh. They're not a flesh-friendly ray, as rays go, but they can do gamma rays, and even more than that, that's now these gamma rays would be powerful enough to apparently produce particles such as quarks, electrons, and muons, and other massive particles, and potentially in the story here, even new types of matter such as dark matter. That, of course, is not confirmed, because we don't know what dark matter is yet, but they reckon it could be speculatively possible to make dark matter now with the LHC in its new phase of throwing things very fast. So that was cool. That jumped out on my feed this week, and I was pretty excited, and I tweeted about it, and I got excited about it, and I thought, I don't even know why I'm excited, but there's whole bunches of atoms, 6 of them, and 24.
I think you are right to be excited. This is a big step up, and I'm not being ironic when I say that, but like the difference between a proton and an atom with an electron around it. Like, people think of the little solar system diagram that we often see of the nucleus of an atom and the cloud of electrons spinning around it. That is not to scale. Like, the proton is tiny compared to how far away the electrons are when they're orbiting.
Right.
I've seen examples like someone standing in a cathedral and saying a speck of dust represents the proton, and the ceiling of the cathedral is the electron spinning around it. That's how big the difference in scale is. So that is a dramatic increase from going from protons to full atoms. That's cool.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it is a bit of a game changer, because it does open up a whole lot of new possibilities, which I'm sure we'll hear about. I mean, this is the most expensive scientific experiment in the history of mankind. I'm sure it's got more to do. Not that it's been resting on its laurels. Let's be clear.
But there's always more to do. That's because science just doesn't stop. It just refuses to stop.
I guess that's definitely one positive for Earthbound science experiments, unlike the ones that we like when we send James Webb. Oh, please.
The telescope.
When we send James Webb Space Telescope up. I'm saying when.
Yeah, it'll happen. It's
when
definitely going to happen. Once we can...
Well, it has to, because it's cannibalized so many other projects. Yep. If that thing don't get up there, it's just going to be so sad. But once it's out, we can't really do much with it. You know what I mean? Like, it has an end of... There will reach a point that we can't do much with it anymore, especially, once they go that far out, because you can't easily go to them.
Yeah.
But LHC, you can just retool it. You can do, put new bits on it like a Swiss Army knife. So
no, I mean, we upgraded the Hubble Space Telescope several times, but that's a very different...
that was close.
Yeah.
That's just
a hop, skip, and a jump.
Low Earth orbit away.
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. And who knows, maybe that's some of the new technologies that Pamela Gay will be talking about when she's here in Melbourne in October. But anyway, I think that's our show. And as always, all the links that we talked about are in the show notes and on the web at scienceontop.com/306. Don't forget, you can always help us out by going to scienceontop.com/donate and supporting us on Patreon. And like I was just saying, you can get your tickets to see Dr. Pamela Gay live in Melbourne on Wednesday, October the 10th, just by going to scienceontop.com/live. Elena Hansen, it is always great to have you back on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I love coming on, and I feel like I always get excited about these things, like not only about coming on and presenting and talking to you guys, but also about these science stories. And I always get excited when it's about an animal. Like, I'm even getting excited now. You can hear it in my voice. But yes, thank you so much for having me on. I love coming on to talk about the science news. And yeah. ElenaHansen.wordpress.com is where people can read your writings. Is there anything else you want to plug? Not quite at the moment, but definitely. Oh, wait, I've got a YouTube channel coming up. So when I have a blog post and it's got a video on it, I put it on my YouTube channel because, I don't know, it looks great on that platform. And actually, I recently sent in an application to be BBC's presenter search. And they wanted you to present a science fact in 1 minute or talk about a science location or something. So I went to a California redwood forest in Warburton, and you can see the video on there because I also get really excited about trees. Yay. That's very cool.
Trees rock. Love trees.
And of course, a big thanks to you, Penny and Lucas.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
And thank you to everyone for listening. We'll be back again next week, putting science on top of the agenda. Join us then.
The Space Force is preparing for liftoff. Vice President Mike Pence announcing a new branch of the U.S. military. Joining me now to react is my son's hero, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He is famed astrophysicist and author of the brand new book, Accessory to War. Thank you for joining us. What's your reaction to this? Do you think that this is the right idea, or is it science and space better left in the hands of private hands like Elon Musk and yourself?
Well, the concept of a Space Force is not new. Plus, as a thing to do, we've done something like this before. You might remember, no, you wouldn't remember, but you might have read that during the Second World War, the Army had a branch of itself called the Army Air Force. And once we learned that this theater of operations, this sphere of operations, had fundamentally different needs, different training, different technologies, different personnel required to operate in that space, if you will, the Air Force then split away from the Army and became its own branch. So in that sense, this idea is not completely crazy, and it's been around for a while.
So what do you think the mission should be? It sounds like you're in favor of it. Do you like the idea? Do you like the way it's being rolled out?
I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but the extent that if we make a Space Force, what I'd like to do is add a couple of things to its portfolio. For example, why don't you check out asteroids to see if one has our name on it and could render us extinct? And don't just tell us that we will become extinct, do something about it. Right now, there is no plan in place anywhere in the world to protect us against killer asteroids or the threat of space debris that could interfere with commerce, interfere with any other kind of operation.